Hello and welcome to everyone, wherever you're watching us from, to the RWB GT 2021 series. We hope you're all doing well and staying safe and you're not too bored with all the lockdowns going on. But to help you through this evening is myself, and with me is James.
Hello.
So for tonight we've got some action-packed adventures, but however, last week in Tier 1, that was even more action-packed with some incidents occurring. But lots of entertainment for us. But James, can you fill us in on your thoughts of last week's shenanigans?
Oh, last week, what a cracking race it was. We had, who was it again? It was Solheim in the McLaren who started P1, I believe, and led for the majority of the race. Unfortunately, got taken out by a backmarker, I believe, and that was his race over, really. He started to slip back from there, and we thought it was going to be Tverian or Verstappen that were going to be battling for P1. One in the Mercedes, one in the Nissan. But surprisingly, we had Oliver Curtin just come out of nowhere with a really late pit and seemed to just nail it, just nailing consistent laps, and pulled himself up to P1 from pretty much nowhere from our perspective. We had a lot of Mercedes at the front end. Imola, a great track for that new 2020 Mercedes GT3 car, and it showed with the performance within the top 5. The 3 of them were Mercedes. But yeah, some great racing, and Oliver Curtin coming out on top with Verstappen and Tverian in P2 and P3.
It was absolutely fantastic. However, we missed the Tier 2 action. So we'll give you a rundown of what happened last week in Tier 2, which seems to have been an extremely clean race, with Jack Camaletto finishing in P1, Menacing Skull in P2, and RWB Isaac in P3, which round out the lads on the podium. Overall, in the top 10, of course, with it only having been round 1 last week, we had the top 3 as mentioned just now, with P4 with Dahlgren, Howland P5, Kai Banks in P6, Goatfriend P7, followed by Muller in P8. P9 is Tyrion, with Simon Mertens rounding off the top 10. Focusing on this week, however, we're at Brands Hatch following the Tier 2 action. If you want to see the timings live as we do with the stream as well as some other information, please check out pitwall.live with the link in the description of the YouTube stream. Unfortunately, pitwall.live doesn't offer the same insight as we are able to. And, well, James, he seems to know this track quite well. Why don't you talk us around here?
Oh, Brands Hatch, what a great track it is. It's a love-hate relationship for this track with me. I've had some great results here, and I've had some equally poor results. Ended up in the barrier at Paddock Hill a few times, and ended up off in the gravel at Clearways, and it is an unforgiving track with some tight, twisty stuff and some very big commitment corners. But we're on board now with Dahlgren as he's coming through the last corner just now onto the pit straight. I'll just give you a full round of the lap, really. Right now, he's coming with the start-finish line, coming up to Paddock Hill Bend, over crest, get into the brakes. It's wet, so you're going to have to just stay away from that apex a little bit, and it's going to understeer, then grip up through the compression at Paddock Hill all the way up to Druids Bend, which is a tight hairpin. I always like to just slowly go into the apex. Some people really like to lead this corner off, so it just depends on the car and the aero. Now coming into Graham Hill, which is a sharp left-hander, 90 degree, and get you to get on the throttle quite early, because you've got quite a run down to Surtees down the quick straight here. Surtees is quite a late apex. You've almost got to go past the corner and then come back at it for the run into the GP section. So there are 2 different sections of this track. This is the extended track, which is the GP loop. The Indy track would have continued back there at the exit of Surtees to Clearways. Now we're coming up to Hawthorns, which is a really big commitment right-hander, down 1 gear and just fire it in, again a late apex, and run it out to the edge of the track. Coming up to Westfield, again another big commitment corner. You've got to run loads of this curve, let it run out to the left and just stay in that throttle. You get a bit of a bump here on the left hand side, and then running up to Sheen curve, which some people refer to Dingledell as well. Yeah, it's a big commitment corner, that blind apex, fire it over, and then into Sterling here, which is a big camber left-hander, and you can really fire it in with loads of speed, and the front will just take it because of that camber coming into the corner. This is the final curve here, which is Clearways. Very odd corner that, because you come over a crest at the apex, the car goes light, and you've got to slowly roll into the throttle and bleed all the way out to the exit point there, and then over the start finish line. for a lap of Brands Hatch, and there are a lot of corners here that some of which are big commitment corners, and really having to trust that the car will grip up to get the time out of it. And yeah, it's a great track, and that's why loads of people love it and see it as one of the homes of motorsport in the UK.
Yeah, it's also very narrow as well. I mean, the action here in the Constructors' League a couple of weeks ago was just absolutely mental, and especially now in the wet, you just saw Dahlgren losing the back end on that curb. It's just going to be absolutely mental today, but geez, I do love Brands.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be treacherous in these conditions, with it being such a narrow track, not forgiving in the slightest, no runoff, just grass and gravel. To be honest, it's sort of the way it should be. I mean, with these big F1 tracks these days, Silverstone and the likes, Spa even, they've got quite a lot of runoff, and that is a safety reason, and a lot of it's tarmac, and it gives the opportunity to really send it in hot, but you've still got that safety guard of being able to run it in and, okay, I'll just run onto the runoff on the tarmac and then come back on track. Whereas Brands, very much a classic style sort of UK circuit with that tight twisty sections, but just grass and gravel as the runoff. So very unforgiving, especially in these wet conditions when you run onto that grass.
Well, yeah, I think the wet conditions have caught everyone off guard. Even though there was a vote about it, everyone seemed to kind of go on, let's go for completely random. So Tier 1 at the moment is perfectly dry. However, for Tier 2, these guys are just running and it's just raining cats and dogs, and it's pretty much just throwing everything it can up the clouds right now. But qualifying was run during the week in the dry, so everyone could get their best times in, and geez, the times are extremely close together, except for P1 and P2. Alex Smith in P1 has managed to set a time 5/10 faster than P2 man of Magnus Dahlgren, which is just blistering pace. Maybe need a look there, but P3 was set by Mad Al, only 6/1000ths of P2, which kind of gives the scale of how close everyone was packed together in this Tier 2 server for Brands Hatch, which, yeah, it's one of those really technical tracks, and it's surprising how many temps you can find by just doing a corner slightly differently. But we will give the full starting grid order later on. But James, the pace from Alex, do you think he's in the right tier, or do you think this is maybe one of those special tracks that maybe he excels on?
Oh, it is a track where if you nail the corners and get everything right, you can find a lot of time on your competitors, but he does seem to have pulled out quite a gap on everyone else. I think, he's in the Mercedes, which I think could go well round here. It can cope with the curves quite well, as proven in Imola. I think that's quite handy for this sort of track, especially with some of the back section, the GP section. Sheen curve, for example, that right-hander over the crest. You've got to take quite a lot of that, and I think the Mercedes will cope well. So, I mean, he could have done. I think he's done a good lap there, but maybe he should be bumped up to Tier 1 with that sort of pace. But the guys throughout the rest of the grid are so close. I mean, it just shows that that they are in the right category, and this is going to be some close racing. But I think the rain has definitely thrown a spanner in the works. I'm sure a lot of them will be changing their setup and getting rid of the camber and straightening everything up to try and make that wet tyre work as efficiently as possible.
Yeah, 100%. But we're currently watching practice, where everyone, as you say, is getting accustomed to the conditions, trying to find those extra temps. Although in the wet, especially if they're jumping on with their dry setup, and as you say, they're now having to adjust to the wet setup, maybe they'll even find seconds into their lap time. And we can see on the screen right now, we've got Kaneko, who's currently 6 seconds off P1 man. But I'm sure we'll see these gaps come down as everyone gets used to it, and hopefully we'll get a dry line sorted so we can see those times plummet down again.
Yeah, I mean, is that the forecast saying it's meant to get a bit heavier, maybe, with the rain?
I'm trying to remember my weather symbols. I'm pretty sure that does mean it gets slightly more intense. I remember us looking at Paul Ricard and getting very confused with the weather symbols there for the 6 hours, but of course that was very extreme rain. And we're hoping that the ACC server gods will kind of let us, not have those same conditions, at least for the driver's sake. I think for us, we're having an absolute hoot and just loving it to bits. But unfortunately, it ended up with a red flag because it just got that bad. So hopefully we don't end the action prematurely here today, and we just keep on with this heavy rain, no more, no less, and it stays at the perfect amount.
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to be interesting with the different cars out on track with their engine layouts and configurations, as well as the level of drivers. So we'll see these. This is where the boys become men in these sort of conditions, and it really differentiates the good drivers from the bad drivers. So being able to find the grip and make the best use out of the wet tyre and keep it in a good condition as well is going to be very interesting. Managing temps as well and making sure they've got that setup nailed, because I think that's going to be a big differentiating factor between the guys who know what they're doing with their car setup to the guys who are still running their dry setup with the wet tyres. So this is going to be interesting for sure.
Well, they do say rain is the great equaliser, don't they? So I like to see it as a way of comparing everyone's size of their balls. Just see the guys in P1 coming out and they've got like a wheelbarrow underneath them. But yes, there's always brilliant action in the wet. And as we say, me and James, we love commentating when it's wet, and oh boy, are we lucky today.
Yeah, I think we're in for a good race, and Brands in the wet's going to be epic fun. At least for us. Some of these guys might have a terrible time. Some of them might have a great time. Just about keeping the car clean, consistent, and keeping your nose clean. And that's what will give you the win, really, in these conditions. And obviously, taking that wet line and keeping it off the rubbered line is usually what you do in real life. I'm not sure with the new changes to ACC whether they've incorporated much more of that. I know if the track's already been rubbered in and it rains, you usually have to take more of a wet line, but sometimes if you come into a fresh server without that rubbered line already there, you can sort of take liberties with that normal racing line. So it's going to be interesting for sure.
Yeah, and with the tread on the wet tyres as well, we can definitely expect lots of off-road action as well. But yeah, it's I do love Brands Hatch, and as I said, we did the Constructors League a couple of weeks ago, and there were definitely some cars that absolutely dominated, had amazing pace around there. But I'm wondering today if we'll see it shake up. We saw the Maccas around there doing really well in terms of pace, but then during the race, there was some incidents with the McLarens.
Really, Josh?
Yeah. Let's not get bogged down about some of my incidents, because I don't speak for what I did a couple of weeks ago. But I am looking forward to today's race massively, and if anyone watching here wants to give us your opinions, your thoughts, any of that, even just wants to say hi, put it in the YouTube chat, we'll definitely see it. If you're on Twitch, we might see it. We might see it, but yeah, get in touch, say hi, and if you're interested in joining the RWB races as you're seeing on stream now, definitely join the RWB Discord to find out how to join us. But geez, for these races, there's something else. I mean, I don't think we'll see as much carnage as the Bahrain. Was it Dubai race we saw?
Oh yeah, Dubai 24. Yeah,
24. Hopefully, we don't see as much carnage as that with as many retirees.
Yeah, I can guarantee that the winners and the podium sitters will be riding camels up and down the pit lane at the end of this race, like they did at the Dubai 24, which was rather interesting to see. I mean, different culture and all that, and it was quite interesting for sure. But yeah, I don't think that will happen in sim racing anytime soon.
I mean, if you can, why not?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It was a spectacle for sure. I mean, definitely something new to watch. But after 24 hours, I think all those guys were ready for bed. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's not as intense as a race like this.
Yeah, I just, having sat in a bucket seat before, and just my arse was numb as fuck after 5 minutes. I would not want to hop on a saddle of a camel. I've had to ride around. Yeah, it's this way. But I'm surprised that half the saddles didn't dissolve afterwards.
Yeah, and of course it's Bahrain. I mean, they couldn't even kick back with a cold beer afterwards.
Oh yeah, of course.
It's not allowed, so it would have been a Sprite or something, which is not what you want after a 24-hour race.
Yeah, and with them being drivers, it'll be Sprite Zero, of course, or doing
Yeah.
keto diets.
Of course.
But yeah, it's interesting now we're watching RWB Cricky, even though it is practice. We are still seeing cars racing during practice, maybe trying to find out the optimum line through the corners, where they can brake, where they can't brake. Yeah, Cricky seems fairly quick.
Yeah, you see this quite a lot in real life, actually, when you have other cars out on track in the rain. Often, if you're following another car, you can see the line they're taking and where the grip is. So if they're having a moment, as tricky as
we see now, yeah.
If they're having a moment on track in front of you and they're sliding at a certain part of the track, you can see, that part of the track's quite slippy. I'll try the other side of the track and see if that grips up a bit better for me. And that's why sometimes you see some of the leaders actually go off in the rain, because they're leading the race. They've got no visual reference in front of them of how slippy a certain corner is, because often in racing, when it's on-off rain, it's changing lap by lap, the grip levels. So if you have that visual reference right in front of you, it's often a good barometer of where the grip is. So that's why we see some of these guys following each other around and testing the waters, really.
I mean, I've seen a bunch of other races when it is raining heavily. You see it more in sim racing than in the real world, but you'll see the leader trying to push as hard as they can, being followed by a train of 5 closely packed together. Leader goes off and the 4 cars behind follow him suit because they're based off him.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely hilarious for us, but currently watching Nate Newcomer go round. And the Porsche seems to be quite strong in the wet, for what we've seen, due to the engine configuration, and it's quite light as well compared to some of the other cars like the Bentley and the Beamer. So I'm wondering if we'll see the Porsche actually start to be in the higher tier. I mean, we saw Olivier Curtin last week in Tier 1 at Imola. He did fantastically well, but his pace wasn't... It was consistent, but it wasn't anything amazing for us to watch. It wasn't over the top quick. So what do you think about maybe favouring the heavier cars or the lighter cars today?
Well, looking at the quali results, I mean, this was in the dry. You've got that Mercedes out front of Alex Smith, and then followed by 2 Ferraris and then another 2 Mercedes. So, closely packed up there. A Nissan, a Lexus, and McLaren. So there is going to be a wide variety of cars in the top 10. But I think, the Porsche could be quite quick in the wet. It's got that weight over the rear axle, so it'll help on that exit, but on entry, it might be a bit pushy. So, but then it has the rotation of the rear end, so it could work really well. I think it really will come down to car setup, because these guys are going to be wanting to get those wheels stood up, reduce all that camber, make that tyre work as efficiently as possible, mess around with the toe a little bit, get it straightened out, and then just looking at how to keep the temp in the tyre, with their brake pads and their brake inlet temps and their aero. So it's going to be a big change for them from quali to this, from that lovely dry track to this sodden British track at the moment. I think it should be interesting for sure. I don't know. I've apparently I've driven the Bentley in the wet on this game, and it seems quite competent in the wet, and it went okay round Brands. So I think they could do all right. But again, I think it's all going to come down to vehicle setup, no matter what car you're in.
Well, that's definitely part of me agrees with you, part of me doesn't. I mean, we've seen in the real world, we see some drivers who are just, it doesn't seem to matter what happens to the setup, they're just quick no matter what. I mean, I'm calling into my head. You've got Ayrton Senna with his Lap of the Gods, was it called, at Donington. You've got Max Verstappen, who can just somehow, no matter how hard he spins, he seems to 99% of the time snap it back straight. I have no idea how he does that kind of wizardry. But yeah, I think sometime in the wet, I still maintain it is the great equalizer, and I don't think setup can do a lot. There's a lot of confidence that you need in the wet. I feel like you need a ton more confidence than in the dry, because everything just goes out the window, and you've got the two different lines which mess everything up. You've got to think about the marbles as well from the tyres as well, picking that up and giving you some extra grip in the wet, whereas in the dry it seems to destroy your braking zone. So I think, yeah, setup definitely comes into it, but skill of the driver is, as I say, the great equaliser for driver skill. And
I think with how long this race is as well, it's going to come down to tyre management, because with the wet tyre, you've got that sharp edge to your block, tread block, which you don't have on the slick tyre. And I think if these guys have their TC, their traction control setting wrong, or their ABS setting wrong, they're going to be taking that sharp edge of the tread block off, and that actually just decreases the efficiency of the tyre and stops it cutting through these puddles and the water on track. And if these guys can stay on top of that and really just, feather into that throttle and just manage that wheel spin and get their braking just, like inch perfect, they'll stay on top of that tyre, manage it for much longer, and ultimately have more grip than their competitors around them. So, I mean, that could definitely play into a factor of how good these guys are at managing their tyres. It should definitely give them an advantage further into the race.
Yeah, what I'm also wondering is if the rain lets up later on into the race as well, and the track starts to dry out, you've got tyres that will then start to overheat and then degrade further. And yeah, there's a lot of times I watch racing, and I used to be, why is he suddenly going off the dry line onto the wet line? And then suddenly it clicks, and it's like, well, they're going onto the wet line to try and cool their tyres down.
Yeah.
And to try and get some grip back into them. So it's definitely tricky. And I mean, one thing we haven't spoken about the rain, which we're going to probably be talking about for the next 3 million years at the moment, and is visibility as well. It's just, especially with the spray being thrown up, Car in P1, he's going to have no problem whatsoever. If he can stay in front. If Alex can stay in front, he's increasing his chance of survivability massively. But with a closely packed grid, everyone very similar on pace from what we've seen in qualifying and dry, and a very narrow track compared to the, say, Paul Ricard, with very little runoff area. I foresee, carnage coming up ahead.
I think these guys have just got to get through the first few laps. The first few laps is always a case of just survival. I think the guys out front usually, obviously, they don't have any cars in front of them throwing the sprayer, but with these big GT3 cars with their extremely wide tyres, these very aggressive tread blocks that move a lot of water, and then this thrown in with the aero of the GT3 cars with their underflow and diffusers sucking up all that water and spray and just throwing it out the back. The guys in the middle of the pack and the back of the pack coming into Paddock Hill Bend and Druids are going to have a really hard time spotting their braking zones and seeing the cars around them. So hopefully they can. If it were me, I'd probably, on the sim, I'd just be watching the car radar pretty much and just driving to that. But obviously in real life you can't do that. So you've really got to have your wits about you, and sometimes all you can see in front is 3 red dots of the car in front, which is their brake lights. And that's all you've got as a reference mark. So it could be quite interesting in the middle and back of the pack. But hopefully, fingers crossed, we have it a clean start, because I think Paddock Hill often produces a bit of carnage if it all goes wrong. So we'll just have to see what happens.
Well, yeah, it's a tricky track, and hopefully it'll go well. But let's talk about some of the incidents you've had in the wet, James. I know it's probably a sore topic for you, but what would you say is your worst one in your opinion? What's your worst incident in the wet?
In the wet, it would probably be at Donington Park. Gone down it was Mazda MX-5 racing back when I first started, and we'd gone down Craner Caves. It was proper torrential rain, like rivers across the track. We have to run semi-slicks no matter the conditions in that series, so it's always treacherous in the wet. No ABS, no traction control. The cars have only got 140 horsepower, but in those conditions it feels like you've got 1,000,000 horsepower. You can't see anything, you've got no roof, so the window's fogging up in front of you. And coming down Craner Caves, it's a bit treacherous. There's rivers across the track. The car's aquaplaning and ripping up, and then we come through Old Hairpin, and I'm sort of, I'd say I was just outside the top 10, and we come through Old Hairpin up the hill towards, I think it's Coppice at the top. All my clients always get muddled up, and a car in front of us had lost where he was on the track, dipped a wheel in the grass, rotated and spun back onto the track, and was virtually stopped, almost facing down the track. And I couldn't see where I was going from the car in front, so I peeked out to see what was ahead of me out of the spray, and at that point the car in front of me had just made contact head on, and spat the car basically that was on setting in the middle of the track in front of me, pretty much where Billy Monger had his incident actually. And I ended up just T-boning straight into the sort of front left of this car, and I took a pretty nasty hit to the old balls, the old gentleman area from my harness, and that left me a bit winded. But unfortunately, the two guys that had that first initial hit, the two guys in front of me, one of them broke his back and the other guy fractured his back. So it was a pretty nasty incident, that one, and there was a few more cars behind us that were caught up in it. So there was about 6 cars in that incident, and it was the last round of the season, and it was one of the worst I've had in the wet. But I've had some good ones around here in the dry. Grand Town. I've been off at Paddock Hill, in Mazdas as well, leading that race, and someone had put gravel on the track as they were coming down the bottom there, and it just skated onto the gravel and sucked it into the wall. So that was fun. And I've been off at Clearway. I've been off everywhere. No, I've only been off at Clearways and Paddock, but I mainly drive the Indy track. The GP track's a different ball game altogether, because that back the GP section's a huge commitment area, and it'll be interesting to see if these guys can keep it together through there, because there's not often that many moves made in the GP section with how fast it is, and it can definitely get a bit treacherous. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, well, we've got 23 minutes left on the clock of practice, and for everyone who's just joined, you can check out all the action as well, not just on YouTube, but if you want to see the live timings as well, check out pitwall.live. It's a website where we see all the timings. You can see exactly what James and I are seeing, and yeah, it gives great insight. But as I said before, you can't beat insight, unlike can't beat commentators' insight, can you? So yeah,
his case.
That's just a byproduct, isn't it?
Yeah, of course.
But yeah, we're currently, as I said, 23 minutes left of practice. We'll have an 80-minute race, but as you can see, it's pissing it down. It's like someone just left a shower running all day, and the track's absolutely just moist as fuck as it comes. It's just absolutely, it's just all gone wrong, hasn't it, James? For the guys who are expecting, yeah, for everyone who was expecting a dry race, it's very much not. Over in a Tier 1 server, it's currently dry as well. Well, I say as well. It's pretty much the opposite to what we've got here. It's perfectly dry conditions, as far as I could see. And yeah, I bet some of the Tier 2 guys wishing they were over there, and some of the Tier 1 guys wish they were over here. But well, it is what it is. And,
yep, it is what it is.
It means for us, at least, we can see lots of action, lots of spins, hopefully lots of good moves as well. And hopefully see the order change up as well from the guys who usually might be at the top end, maybe dropping down to some of the guys at the bottom who can't do as well on the drive, but have, well, they've got balls of steel and just somehow managed to find a pace in the wet.
Yeah, it should be interesting for sure. I mean, weather like this, Josh, it just makes you want to stay at home and curl up in bed with a good book, you know. And this is definitely grim, even by British standards. I'm surprised there are still crowds in those grandstands there. We have Charger in the chat actually, and he says he wants to know what your favourite Pringle flavour is.
Oh, Pringle flavour. Well, I'll let you answer that one, James, because last time I spoke about Pringles, I ended up spinning off and crashing into Charger. So, if you want to go first.
Funny that. I think, you can't go wrong with a bit of sour cream and onion. I mean, that always goes down well, no matter the crowd. So that would probably be my sort of easy get out of jail free option of Pringles.
Oh, you're such a simple person. Mine is mine's definitely got to be barbecue. You know, it's just it goes well with everything. You can have it with sour cream and chive dip. You can have it with salsa. You can have it with you can just enjoy it with anything. You can even have like a nice pint as well, and it's just always it's such a safe thing, a safe bet, you know. But yeah, that's my Pringle flavour. Or the pigs and blankets special.
Oh, okay, very interesting. You mentioned pints there, and that's just, you know, this lockdown's made me crave a nice ice cold pint, you know, freshly pulled into a lovely tall ice cold pint glass.
I'm sorry, do you have lockdown in Spain?
Unfortunately, yes.
Oh man. Well, I've got
the weather's better though.
Yeah, I doubt that. It's currently raining where I am, but it's nowhere near as bad as what these guys are. But luckily for these guys, they're just at home in a sim rig. Either it's just a desk chair with a GT3's strapped on, all the way to those guys with the multi-thousand-pound sims, which is kind of describes you and I, James, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've got very differing setups, but we still have some good battles on track when we're having a laugh.
Yeah, definitely. It's good. It's good racing with RWB and not with James, because at least my safety rating's gone up on ACC. So yeah, it's always good.
Rubbing's racing.
Rubbing is racing.
Unfortunately, ACC does not see it that way.
Oh man! But Chargers told us his favourite Pringle flavour, and he said plain with cheese and chive dip. I don't really know what to say to that. If I eat something with plain flavour, I just don't see the point in eating it. That's my hot take.
To be honest, I don't really have Pringles with dips, so that's a new one for me, to be perfectly honest.
Oh, you cretin! Have you never been to a barbecue?
I usually have tortillas with tortilla crisp with dip, and not Pringles.
I'm sorry, you're too upper class for us, James.
Philistines.
homemade guac, someone?
Homemade guac. Oh, you can't beat a good homemade guac. Oh, that shop bought stuff just doesn't cut it, Josh. You gotta slave over it for hours, just making it by hand.
Jeez, you just. Some of us are employed, James. You know, we don't
Really?
We don't get paid for our hobby, do we?
I thought you handed back your work laptop.
Getting back to the action on track, we've still got Alex Smith in P1, but obviously, as we were speaking earlier about the quality results, P1 to P2 there was a 6/10 gap, which, well, that was a suspiciously big gap, wasn't it? But luckily now, as you can see on screen, there's now a 100th gap between P1 and P2. And as I said earlier, and always will say and will say forevermore, it's the great equaliser, James.
Yeah, the great equaliser is the wet, and I think Alex has had a little moment there in the pits to run through his setup, and he's definitely pulled that time out of the bag. I think he wasn't up there earlier on with some of these guys pulling out some good times. That RWB Crookie's been working his way up in P6 as well, so I think it's going to be a close race. I think it's definitely going to, as you say, equalise the field, level out the playing field, and definitely produce a good race. And I think Alex is still showing that he's got the pace to be at the front, even in these conditions. But interesting to see the Lexus is comfortably behind him, and followed by a newcomer in the Porsche. So as you were saying earlier, the Porsche could be quite quick around here in the wet.
I mean, hopefully we'll see another surprise P1 from the Porsche out of nowhere, just RKOing that P1 into their hands. As we saw Olivier Curtin last week in Tier 1, but we're following Tier 2 this week, and it seems like everyone's a lot more of a similar pace in quali, but that was in a dry end, of course. Well, I don't really need to state it, do I? But it's a bit wet, isn't it? But yeah, it's good to see that there is. It doesn't seem like there is a dry line forming from what we can see on our screens. It still seems but it just seems like a bathtub out there right now with someone leaving the taps on. And yeah, it doesn't seem like there's going to be a respite, as we can see from the weather forecast in the top right. It will be a wet start. It will be just like this for the start of a race in 15 minutes' time. But yeah, it's just such a shame for those people who are hoping for a dry race.
Yeah, I mean, I think these guys in the pits, they're sat there at the moment, but I think they could be doing the wrong thing. They should be out on track. They're getting their laps in, because the more laps you put in these conditions, the more grip you find. You know the nuances of the track, and you know where the water tends to build up, and you can find a bit more grip and a bit more pace if you stay out and just lap and actually make mistakes. Because if you're making mistakes, if you go in sometimes a bit hot, and say like Graham Hill here, as I'm watching Wilk go through that corner, if you push it in a bit too hard sometimes, you think, oh god, I've lost loads of time there, but then all of a sudden that front end grips up and you come off that dry line and you get the car rotated and you get on the throttle. So these guys need to be out there getting the laps in and learning where that grip level is, because that will massively benefit them coming into the race, especially if it's going to stay like this for a considerably longer time than we thought. But I doubt there'll be a dry line anytime soon. I think it would have to stop raining for that to start forming. Even with this level of cars around here, often that GP section stays extremely wet in real life, even till, even after a while after it stopped raining, because it's never used that much. It can be quite green, is what we say. It doesn't have much rubber in the surface, which means you can take more of a dry line actually around the GP circuit, but it gets wet with all the trees and stays wet for quite a long time.
Indubitably. For those watching, I'm trying to get off my habit of saying definitely, so I've got a list of synonyms for definitely, so I can get out of this nasty habit that I've got. But yeah, I totally agree with you, and it is just one of those things. But everyone's in the same boat, so it's not like someone's been it's not like ballast or say throttling the turbo or putting a restrictor on. It's universal, which is a good thing. But we've seen quite a large difference in pace in Tier 1. And there's been a little bit of discussion on the side, some questions being thrown out. So what would you say, James, to ballast? What makes ballast work? What makes success restrictors work? And do you think it should be encouraged?
I think it's a good thing in a way, but a bad thing. A lot of these manufacturers can put a lot of time developing a car to be quick, and then it comes into a championship and it gets what we call bopped or balance. It gets the balance of performance. This is what a lot of governing bodies do. Is adjust this thing called the balance of performance, which is what they try and use to level out the playing field between all the manufacturers of all the cars. And ballast is one of the options they have to vary on these cars, along with power and ride height, so they can influence how much power a car can make, how much weight it has to carry, and how high or the minimum ride height that the car has to sit at. And they vary that between manufacturers to try and balance all these cars out throughout the field, and that's what happens in real life, and that's what happens in Assetto Corsa Competizione as well. Obviously a lot more software based than hardware based, as it is in real life, but it's good from a racing standpoint to balance these cars out and make the racing as close as possible. But from a driver's standpoint, you can really be pulling your hair out sometimes when you have a really good race one weekend and you're winning, and then the next week the governing body says, oh, actually you did enough winning last weekend, now you're getting an extra 20 kilos of ballast and an extra 5 mil of ride height, so it can be a good thing to complain about as a driver, for sure. It's a good excuse to use. It's definitely in my excuse book, so
of course it is.
Yeah. I mean, you need to list them out. You need to have them ready to go. So we'll just see what these guys make of it. But I think these cars are all quite well balanced. In the dry, they each have their own stronger and weaker tracks, no matter the balance performance, just because of engine layout and how they perform. So I think, as I say, I think in the dry, the Mercedes should go really well around here, which we're on board with at the moment, actually. But the wet is all to play for, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you were talking about the different ways that they changed the BOP, because it does effectively change the three different categories of the car. You've got the ride height for the aerodynamics, for the efficiency of the car. You've got the ballast, which affects obviously the handling of the car, and then the restrictor for the straight. So it is really interesting, like, if you read more into it, to see how it affects the car. But yeah, I hope that it doesn't go down the BTCC way of doing pop, where it's more of a, we're going to decide who's going to win this week, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the BTCC, it's a lot more political. I think, they have a very much more what they call success ballast, which is basically say you win, say you're leading the championship. So, sorry, I'll start this again. Say you win the first race, for example, at Brands Hatch. For race 2 of Brands Hatch, you will get 60 kilos of ballast because you came first, and it goes down in increments of 6 kilos from P1 to P10, I believe. But if you then, because you've got that 60 kilos of ballast in race 2, you're ultimately going to be slower than the guys behind you. So then these guys come through and they another guy wins the race, and then he gets that 60 kilos of ballast, and then you get less ballast. And it's quite a convoluted system, and it means you're constantly getting battles, and it is good entertainment, but it's sort of, again, it's annoying as a driver to then have to deal with that all season. Ideally, that's what they do in GTs is do this balance of performance, and they have this actual initial test at the start of every season with the cars to try and make them as equal as possible. And even in GT series, the balance performance is changing all year, but they don't really do that in British touring cars. They just have the first race with no ballast, and then everyone just gets their success ballast from there, depending on where they finish the race. So it's basically 6 and 2 3s really. It's just two different ways of going about slowing down the front runners.
It's it's interesting how they can adjust and try and make the racing more entertaining or more competitive. But yeah, it does seem a bit counterintuitive, penalising the guy who comes first.
Yeah.
But like, at the end of the day, it is literally 6 and 2 3s. They've both got pros and cons for doing it, and I mean, I'm game for either way. If it gives us closer racing and changes up who wins each week, I'm all for it. But if they choose not to do it and we end up with what we have now, where we can actually see, it's a bit better for us to see the difference in paces between each person. We can start to recognise people rather than positions. But yeah, it's a good way of doing it. But as we were talking, James, we've seen Alex Smith suddenly pull a 5/10 gap to P2, and then a 3/10 gap from P2 to P3. So there's already a difference in pace between the top guys. But all the way through the field beyond that, it's looking really close, to be honest. If I pull up the timing sheet here, you can see this information on pitwall.live. Sorry for everyone who keeps hearing me repeat this, but it's such a great tool, and James and I absolutely love using it because we can actually see everything what's going on. But yeah, as you can see, it's so close between everyone else in the field. There is some differences between, say, P6 all the way through to P24, but within that, it's pretty close between the rest of them. And yeah, it's just brilliant to see.
Yeah, I think, it's all well and good being able to set that ultimate pace lap time, as Alex has shown you can do, but he has to be able to do that for the full 80 minutes in these conditions, and that's where the boys become men, really, and it is the true defining factor of whether these guys can win or not is if they can consistently put in these lap times and keep it on track, because these conditions, as I say, the conditions are constantly changing every lap, and these guys have got to adapt to that. And I think that's what's going to be the deciding factor of who wins this race, is who can adapt the fastest to the changing conditions.
Yeah, it is going to be interesting because, yeah, as you say, they're going to be just because they set a fastest lap now doesn't mean they're going to be able to do it for the next 80 minutes.
Yeah.
But we do have 5 minutes left on the clock of practice. So I'd recommend everyone take this time, go grab a drink, grab some snacks, pull up a chair, and get comfy, because it's a long race, and we're definitely not going to be short of action, are we, James?
No, definitely not. I think with the caliber of drivers in this lobby, compared with the weather and the close racing that we'll certainly see very shortly, we're definitely going to be in for an entertaining watch over the next 80 minutes once this race gets underway. And I'm fully ready for it all, to be perfectly honest. I think it's going to be great. I just can't wait for turn 1 Paddock Hill, with all the spray mid-pack, and see if these guys can keep it all together.
Well, I'm hoping we can actually see everything going on track with all the spray, but I'm sure it'll be fine. We're seeing a lot of drivers heading back to the pits, so I'm wondering if the race briefing is about to start and whether we'll move on to the race start, which might be my cue to actually give a rundown of who's where and who's doing what. So, for the starting positions, we have the following: Alex Smith in P1 with that blistering time, with Dahlgren in P2, closely followed behind by Mad Al. RWB Isaac is in P4, P5 is Nedzi, Banks P6, Gix P7, Crew P8, and RWB Alwyn and Rigel in P9 and 10 respectively. Goat Friend is in P11 with Howl in P12. Camaletto, who wants to aim for that P1 win again, is in P13, with Simcox in P14. RWB Robert is in P15, with Wilk in P16, Skull in P17, Kaneko P18, Nemeth P90, and Eugenie P20 in the BMW as usual. Whoa, I've lost my track. Hang on, give me a second. We've got Mike Bull in P21 with Colo Denise in P22, followed by RWB, Flack, and FX. P25 is Carl Newis with Anderson in P26. P27 is Humphreys, Nielsen in P28, Mertens in P29, and Nate Newcomer in P30. P31 is Charger, who weirdly is not in a Golf Porsche today, but followed closely behind him is Gooch in P32. Muller is in P33, and he'll have a lot of work ahead of him to get back within the top 10. And finally, to round off everyone in this Tier 2 grid at Brands Hatch today in the wet, is RWB Cricky in P34.
Oh, so, beautiful.
Beautiful as always, and in record time as well. It was a speed run and a half. Glad I wrote all that down before this. How do you think the start's going to go, James? I know it's a very loaded question, and no one can see in the future as far as I know, but what do you think?
I think Alex will have to get a cracking start to try and keep it clean through turn 1. He's got the inside line, which will help him defend into turn 1, but he'll be on the rubbered line at the apex, so you'll have to watch for that front end pushing out, assuming he gets there all okay, of course. I think the middle of the pack's going to be where we might see some dramas, I have to admit, with the way that the Brands Hatch layout and track is. The pit straight isn't actually straight. It's just a constant radius curve pretty much to Paddock Hill Bend, and coming up over that crest into the braking zone, especially with all the spray, it's just going to be very interesting for these drivers. If they have VR headsets or if they have a 3-monitor setup, if they can look left and right, they'll be probably doing that as much as possible to see actually where they are on track. So I think that'll be interesting for sure to see if these guys come out clean in the middle. But to be honest, I think you could do really well in this race from starting where RWB Cricky is at the back. Because I think that is often quite a safe place to be in these sort of conditions. Because you could just pull away, cruise along for that first lap, let everyone take themselves out maybe, and just go on round to a decent result. So in 15 seconds, these guys will be rolling, and we'll see how it all pans out. Well,
let's give me a second as I try to reconnect back onto the streaming computer. Unfortunately, I've lost it. But let's just hope I can get everything back on for the race start, which means you, James, will probably have to take lead on this start of the race.
Absolutely no bother. I'm sure these professionals will do a great job and hopefully keep it clean. We're following Damien Wilk onto the start finish here at Brands Hatch through clearways and onto Clark Cave. And the lights are out and we're underway racing at Brands Hatch with the GT3 Tier 2 2021 series of RWB. Nice wet start, and it looks like everyone is keeping it clean here through Paddock Hill Bend, through the compression. Yeah, it seems like these guys have kept the level head and decided maybe just to stay in their good positions until everything pans out in this first lap, which is probably a good idea for these guys, keeping it clean through Graham Hill here with Damien, doing a great job piloting a Lamborghini Huracan GT3 car, rear engine, V10 engine, be singing. Yeah, these conditions, as we have a spin there, I think, and a contact at 30s with one of the other Lamborghinis. I think that may have been Robert, possibly in the number 3 car. That's very unfortunate. 30 is a tricky corner there, lay apex, and just got caught out in these conditions. Spun up the rear wheels, and I think probably didn't have enough traction for that, the traction control intervention there. Wow, these guys are doing a really good job in these conditions. Shame you're not seeing this, Josh, actually. Doing a great job. Sheen curve there, Damien doing an excellent job on the curves. Excellent job. Hopefully, it looks like everyone has somewhat come off unscathed there.
Yeah, so far looks good. Hoping the camera doesn't stick with Damien. I mean, as much as he might be happy that the stream stuck with him, we want to see everything else going out on track. So, yeah, if you can bear with me for just a sec as I try and get everything back underway. But yeah, it looked. As I was about to say, it looked absolutely clean, but unfortunately, T1 just there. That's not as clean as I was about to comment it was.
Yeah.
But
that was
massive collision at turn 1 there at Paddock Hill. No, yes.
Yeah, Paddock Hill Bend. Yeah, in the compression. That's very unfortunate, and as we said, I mean, in these conditions, it's to be expected. Incidents like this, you know. But it's unfortunate to see these guys tangled up in something like that. Often when those guys come over the crest of Paddock Hill, they're trying to get on the throttle, and if a car's spinning in front of them, they haven't got many options, to be perfectly honest. So lucky there wasn't potentially more cars involved in that, as we see Damien drop down to P27 now.
Well, you're doing an excellent job, James, while I'm busy
yeah, no problem.
trying to rectify this. But
Damien will be loving this, getting all the attention of the Tier 2 stream.
Absolute glory hog.
I'm looking on Pit Wall Live actually, and I'm not seeing Alex Smith at the front, strangely. I'm seeing Dal Green at the front of the pack. So, interesting to see where he's gone. I'll see if I can find him and see what's happened to him. It'd be a shame if he put all that effort into qualifying and then didn't get to lead at least a lap of the race. Let's have a look through this.
Well, we predicted that this race would be absolute carnage, and luckily it's not that bad, but yeah, it looks like I don't see Alex anywhere on these timing sheets. It could be a retirement, unfortunately, but yeah, if that's the case, unlucky Alex. Good luck next time, get good and all that, but but we've still got Dahlgren currently in P1 with Madal in P2. We then have Neds in P3 and Godzilla, RWB, Kai Banks in P4, I'm getting all his names mixed up, with Joy Gixer in P5 and RWB Isaacs in P6 with Rigel behind him in P7. So the guys up at the front they're still having a good battle, still having a good bash, and yeah, I'll hopefully get everything up and running so that we can stop looking at Damien's arse.
As we see a change of position there with Madal and I was thinking Ned's at the at the front there. It looks like there may have been an incident at the front. Dahlgren still in the lead with a 2-second gap over the P2 man of RWB Godzilla. He's closely followed by John Gixie there in the Lexus. We're all seeing this on the Pit Wall Live, which is in the description. Definitely worth checking out. Hopefully we can get these cameras up front as well to see what's going on. As unfortunately we don't want to be. Unfortunately, Damien, we don't want to be watching you for the full 80 minutes.
He might have some words to say to us afterwards, but yeah, I'm fully on board with James. But yeah, we can still kind of do a radio version of this, can't we, James? With the pitwall.live information, with Damien in the background, you know, keeping us nice. But yeah, it's still P1 Dahlgren. Kai Banks is now in P2. I've no idea how he made up that place from P4, but it looks like P2 and P3, who were there, have dropped down. Sorry, my head's all over the place at the moment. But yeah, change of places there up at the front with Kai Banks in P2 now. Gixter in P3. RWB Isaac in P4. It looks like Rydel's just taken P5 away from Goatfriend, who's now in P6. Madal is now in P7 with Joy Camaletto in P8. So he's made a couple of places, Camaletto. Ian Simcox is now in P9 with Nate Newcomer just making a pass now to get into P10. And we've currently, it looks like a spin from Kaneko, who's dropped all the way down from P10. And it looks like he's going to come out in P20 at this rate. Of course, all this information is available to you guys on pitwall.live as we're using it now. But yeah, it's a lot of action on track at the moment, and hopefully we can get this back up and running for you.
Mm-hmm. I'm seeing a slight difference in the ACC leaderboard on the left there to the pit wall leaderboard. So I'm wondering if Alex may still be in the mix up the front there, but which might just be a bit of a disparity between the two. But I guess we'll find out in due course. But yeah, we've got a mix of cars at the front of the grid. We've got P1's a Ferrari, P2 is a Nissan, followed by a Lexus and 2 Mercedes, another Lexus and another Ferrari. It seems to be that the front of the grid somewhat dominated by that front engine rear-wheel drive layout, with the 2 Ferraris in the mix in P7 and P1. So mid-engine Ferrari leading the way, and followed by lots of front-engine rear-wheel drive cars. The Mercedes doing well, P4, P5, as we suspected. It's a decent car to be lapping in these conditions, especially on this track with the aggressive curves and being able to absorb those with that lovely 2020 updated suspension. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens, as we're seeing a lot of green sectors actually throughout the field. It may be that everyone's sort of getting settled in for the race, finding their rhythm and finding the grip on the track, and that'll be helping them get to grips with the conditions. Lots and lots of green sectors, which is good to see.
Yeah, unfortunately, there is no Dance Hall Days by Wang Chung being played today for this radio show. But yeah, James keeping you guys updated very well, considering my slight fuck up here, which I'm trying to rectify. But yeah, it's brilliant stuff at the moment. I've currently got my own view of it as well. Unfortunately, can't stream it to you guys because I'm quite inept at technology. But there's as you can see from the track, the pitwall.live, if you have it open, there's a massive cluster of cars currently going around the back, heading down towards Stirling. And it looks like Damien is trying to fight his way forward through this pack, so he can catch up. But that's car number 23 currently leading the pack at the front. So that should be, if I can get my car 13, sorry. So it looks like it should be P18, I believe, up there. But yeah, it's kind of stagnated into this kind of everyone's just following each other, trying to find where they can outbrake each other, where they can get the run on them. So not so much action at the moment, not many places being changed. However, if we do see any places being changed, we will let you know. But saying that, it looks like Dan Anderson has had an off at the moment, and he's lost 2 places, dropping him down to P22 in the Mercedes. But it looks like he's back on track now. I wonder if he's had a slight whoopsie and gone slightly wide somewhere. But yeah, he's still on track. He's still going in P22. Further up the front, it's still no changes being made. Everyone's still hanging together. You've got the top 3. You've got Dahlgren, Kai Banks, and Gixer, all following each other in a nice, neat kind of trail. And then there's a 5-second gap from P4 to P3 with RWB Isaacs left in no man's land, trying desperately to catch up to P1, 2, 3 at the moment. But yeah, everything's kind of settled down into a nice rhythm.
I think RWB Isaac actually in P4 with that 5-second gap to the front guys, and he has a nice gap, 10-second gap to the car behind. So he's in sort of no man's land, as you said, but he's in a good position to just, lap consistently, get those, get his foot in the door with those early lap times and get a feel for the car and the conditions and just keep it clean and consistent. I think that's a great position to be in. You don't have as much spray from the cars in front, and he'll hopefully be able to be one to watch possibly throughout the race if he can just, as I say, keep it clean. He could be in the fight at the front by the end, so that could be a more long-term strategy for him, as we see that the RWB Godzilla in P2 in the Nissan has closed within a second now of Dahlgren, so we could be on for a front-running fight there. As we see that also Rigel and Mad Owl in P6 and 7 are pretty close together now. They're pretty much bumper to bumper on the pit wall live app. So it's all to play for at the moment. I think these guys are going to start maybe getting their elbows out now they've got a feel for the conditions in the car with that extra fuel load that they're carrying to last them to their pit stop. I think they're going to start possibly making some overtakes. God, looking at Damien's stream there, it still looks pretty sodden as he's coming up to Hawthorne's very big committed right-hander. That GP section, as I was saying earlier, it's not actually often used for either track days or racing, especially club racing. They predominantly use the Indy circuit, which connects between Surtees and onto clearways, which is a bit earlier on. It really shortens the track, and in this GP section we're seeing Damien Wilk go through as he comes up to Stirling now, the 90 degree left. Because it's not often used, you don't actually get as much rubber laid into that racing line of the track, so you can actually exploit more of the track in real life here in the wet than you do in the Indy circuit, which is just joining now. So this is where the Indy circuit picks back up again, and you often have so much grip on the GP circuit that when you come back onto that Indy loop and through clearways, that you see a lot of people understeering and sliding off track just because of how slippy that dry line is, because it's used so much more. That GP section really messes with people and gives them a false sense of security that the track's ripped up all of a sudden. So in real life, there is actually quite a duality between the two sections of track. The Indy circuit, which we're on now, and I'll show you where the Indy ends and the GP begins, is just up ahead at Surtees here. So Surtees in a GP is a really late apex, and you've got to really slow it down. But for the Indy, it really just cuts over that. It's a nice fast left and dive right up into clearways. So it's definitely an interesting track in the GP section. As I say, it's a massive commitment. There won't be much overtaking if you're a level-headed person, at least on the GP section. But often the Indy section produces a lot of overtaking possibilities with that Druid's hairpin and Panic Hill Bend as well. You can often see some moves into there. But yeah, the GP is very interesting. I love the GP section.
Yeah, I can tell you absolutely love it. Why don't you marry it, James?
It's still my favourite track in the UK, I don't think, but it's a great section. I think it's much better in a faster car. The GP section, just because, especially with aeros, you just fire it in at Hawthorns and and the light can just rips up, and it's an amazing part of the track.
Yeah, for sure. It's really good for Damien. At least we're seeing him making up positions. But it seems like there are people who are kind of trying to push too hard and just slipping off. We saw a lap ago, one person just flying off at paddock and just going off into the left and spinning off into the gravel. And yeah, I wonder if kind of everyone's trying to push too hard rather than just sit behind them, because it's only 15 minutes into the race so far with the pit window now open. And yeah, it kind of seems a bit mad to go for the absolute crazy passes now. You may as well just sit behind one another and kind of follow everyone through.
Yeah, as you say, in these conditions, you can often just sit behind people and wait for them to make a mistake, and that becomes your opportunity to overtake them, or sometimes they just send themselves off. So, yeah, as you say, that you could just sit behind and hope that, you know, as long as you're clean and consistent, the person in front might not be. As we see, actually, Dahlgren and RWB Godzilla in P1 and P2, they've closed to within 0.4 of a second now, so these guys are getting close together for P1 and P2 battles, so hopefully we can cut back to that at some point. But yeah, what a race it is currently.
Well, it looks like unfortunately I just don't have the skill at the moment to try and get the director back, so we're going to be stuck watching Damien. But luckily for you, James, I am sharing my screen of the other stuff, of what I'm seeing. So we can at least commentate on everyone apart from Damien and have a more up-to-date feed on what's going on. But at the moment, yeah, it's just absolutely jam-packed on track. We've got all these trains forming everywhere. And yeah, at front, we've currently got Dahlgren, Godzilla, and Gixxer. No change there. It seems like they're just going to follow each other around. Kai Banks, or aka Godzilla, as you may hear me chop and change, he's just kind of going along. But at the moment, they've just passed lap traffic, so it seems like there were casualties so far, and it looks like there have been people who have pitted. And yeah, it doesn't look good. But Isaac's catching up massively to them. He's managed to bring that gap down from 6 seconds earlier to 4.5 seconds now, so he is gaining on them. I'm wondering if Dahlgren's feeling a bit of pressure and trying to defend, and I wonder if Kai Banks is being like, "No, mate, come on, just go. I want you to keep going."
Yeah, I think Dahlgren could actually have a big brain play here and actually back up RWB Godzilla into Gixxer there in P3. So if he does do that, it allows them to battle, and then Dahlgren could just pull away and let them, you know, get their elbows out, and hopefully he can just keep it clean. But I mean, they've lapped up to P23 now. They've lapped, so there has been some casualties in those opening laps, unfortunately. If people have dropped down and had an unfortunate start to the race.
Yeah, it looks like Nedzi and RWB Flak have unfortunately had either severe damage and had to go back to the pits quite a lot, or have decided to retire after having severe incidents. And to be honest, I don't blame them. If it was a dry track, I personally would keep going, but in the wet, it's demoralizing enough. But then to also have more people just overtaking you, blue flags in the wet, is just an absolute pain. But we saw earlier Nate Newcomer having an absolutely phenomenal pass, it looks like, into Druids on FX UK, he's in P13, so that's now Newcomer in P12, as you can see on the pitwall.live. We've got Kevin Shepherd, RWB Cricky, and Alistair Howe, who've made the early pit stops, and that's them going all the way to the end now. They're not doing any more pit stops, or planned pit stops, should I say, unless it's damage.
That's a bold strategy to. I mean, they could have been caught up in initial first few lap incident there, and had to pit and thought they may as well get their pits out the way, but that's going to be tough. I think they may have to pit later on in the race for fuel, possibly. do an extra pit stop, especially to be pitting this early in the race. And I think if they were to try and drag it out, those tyres would be dead by the end of that. By the end of this hour we have left of this race at Brands Hatch, because the track can be quite demanding on tyres.
Do you know what I'm seeing on the timing sheets right now, James? I'm seeing Alex Smith in P9. I don't know if it was a glitch or something, but he's suddenly popped back into the race in P9. He just overtook Bull now, and he's going for another move on Rigel, it looks like.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I don't know what happened, but unfortunately Alex has a little squirrel coming around Clark Curve that's now giving Bull the inside line as they come along now on the pit straight going into Paddock Hill. And it looks like Alex Smith is going for the outside, defends the outside, but Bull, he just manages to park the car perfectly on the inside and gets the move done. As they head up now into Druids, Alex Smith looking down the inside of Bull, but doesn't make the pass. Bull covers him off nicely. And that looks like Bull has managed to get his position back. And Alex is going to have another think about how to get the move done and make sure that he keeps the position.
Yeah, it's interesting that we... There's definitely been a bit of a glitch there. Why I don't know why we can't see him on Pitwall Live, but we can see him in the server and having a good race. So something awry there. I mean, we were contemplating that he might have some hacks because he was so quick at in qualifying it on our Factor 2 the other day. We were all a bit baffled, so maybe that's what's glitching his ACC game out and why we can't see him correctly. So as we know, he likes to qualify in front of people and doesn't always lead to a clean race and a good result. So we'll see. And he obviously qualified P1 for this, but he isn't there at the moment. So maybe he can fight his way back up with the pace he had.
Someone who is fighting a lot is Maddow on P6. He's currently trying to fight Goatfriend as they go along the pit straight now, heading up to Paddock Hill. Goatfriend, he's covering him off nicely, Maddow, as they go through Paddock Hill, heading up into Druids now. Goatfriend covering the inside, and Maddow trying to have a look, but he doesn't quite make it, sticking tight as they go through Druids now. But Goatfriend manages in that absolutely blistering pace Lexus. I don't know where the grip comes from in the rear engine, in the front engine car to the rear. But as they pass now through lap traffic, heading up now, going up towards Surtees, and yeah, it looks like Maddow is going to have another think and try and push again, going for it. But meanwhile, at the front in the top three, it looks like Kai Banks got passed by Gixxer, who's now in P2, and he's hounding the back of Dahlgren in P1 as they go around now through Sheen Curve, heading up towards Sterling's. But Gixxer is not letting off, but unfortunately for Kai Banks, he's dropped down with a 2.5 second gap to Gixxer in P2. With Isaacs closing fast up to Kai Banks, and even he's closing up to P1, P2 as well.
Yeah, I saw someone off on the stream there. The Damien was overtaking just into clearways. Seemed like an Aston off with quite a lot of front end damage. So I'm wondering if that was possibly maybe even RWB Quickie, or it was a Gulf liveried Aston, which seemed very beaten up. So maybe we'll see him going into the pits again. I mean, he's already been in, but it looks pretty serious.
Yeah, as we've seen now, RWB Charger has now gone into the pits. He's currently he's dropping down, so he'll be coming out at the back. But of course, these are all pits, and pitting changes up the order massively during the pit window. However, currently looking at P12, P13, and P14 is what I'm looking at on stream right now. And Dan Muller, unfortunately, has dropped back. He's about 8 seconds behind. However, FX in P13 is now hounding the back of Nate Newcomer in P12, and that Aston with the funky lime green and bright pink livery stands out a lot, but it looks like FX is a man on a mission right now as they go through Paddock Hill, heading up to Druids. This seems to be the place where everyone catches up to and tries to make the move done, but it looks like Nate Newcomer covers off the inside, and FX compromises himself and unfortunately drops back, giving him a 1 second gap.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that, but Druids and Paddock Hill are definitely the corners to be watching, I think, and that's where a lot of the moves will be made with that double sort of right-hand complex. It often forces people to try and defend Paddock, and then they get a bad run up Druids, and people can try and get down the inside there and basically block past people. So we might be seeing a lot more action there to come.
Well, we've just seen a move there now from Alex Smith on RWB Rigel, going around Sheen Curve. It looks like he got the job done at Hawthorns and he's now in P8. So he's definitely a man on a mission trying to rectify whatever happened earlier, trying to get his P1 place back. He's charging through at the moment, heading now along the pit straight. But we've got Mad Owl still hounding the back of Goatfriend as they head up now into Druids. Goatfriend covering the inside of Druids and Mad Owl having to back away from that move. And it looks like he's going to have to wait another lap before he can get another move in. Still looking around the back, but it doesn't look like he's taking a peek down the inside or anything. But yeah, it's just unfortunate as we see Damien Wilk on screen now. It looks like he went off. Hopefully he keeps going. But I wonder do you think if he leaves, we'll get auto-directed back? We can only dream. But as we head on, as we watch now on Mad Owl, back to that action as they go through Hawthorns. Mad Owl still hounding the back of Goatfriend. It doesn't look like there's going to be any relief for Goatfriend from this Ferrari, just hounding the back of him as they go through Westfields. But yeah, it looks like lap traffic getting well out of the way, even going off track, trying to get out of the way of these two titans having an absolute mega battle in P5 and P6, but it doesn't look promising from Goatfriend, and I think he's going to have to wait another couple of laps before he can get the move done.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see what happens with that, but Damien's just darted into the pits after that incident, coming into his pit box now. Hopefully he'll get that damage repaired as soon as he can, and possibly see him back out on track soon, but unfortunately he'll be losing quite a few places there to traffic coming through, so it's very unfortunate, and that's why in these conditions you've got to try and keep your nose clean and stay out of trouble. And unfortunately, we're seeing people getting tangled up in incidents that often they've caused themselves.
Well, one incident that's waiting to happen because of three guys is between Simcox, Kaneko, and Shepherd in P17, 18, 19. Sorry, it's Humphreys, Simcox, and Kaneko for P16, 17, 18. And these guys are all over the back of each other. It's a nice battle between them all as they go around around Sheen Curve, heading up now into Sterling's. And it looks like Simcox going for the inside on Kaneko, but yeah, it looks like Simcox manages to hold the position as they head up now onto Clark Curve, going round, heading onto the pit straight now, and it looks like that fight between Simcox and Kaneko has given themselves a respite, and Kaneko has compromised himself, dropping back down to well over a second and a half, splitting all three of them from each other. Meanwhile, Bull is still trying to fight with Rigel, and it looks like Alex Smith is back down in P10 again. And well, if you can see what I'm seeing, his bonnet that's quite a gap he's got between his bonnet and his bumper. So I'm wondering if he's had an off and a little slam into a wall.
I think that would be even worse for him, tumbling down from P1 to wherever he is at P10. He's already lost a lot of positions, and then to further pick up damage, especially this early on in the race, it's definitely not going to make his day, unfortunately, but I'm sure he'll be able to pick himself up and actually come back with a decent result and possibly dive in the pits for an early pit stop to get that damage repaired, as we've seen some of the back markers do, and we should be seeing more of them soon, actually, with everyone being lapped up to P18 now. So as you were saying, that Kaneko, Simcox and Humphreys battle that we were seeing in P15, 16, 17, these guys might get lapped pretty soon by those front runners, so that could all be thrown in the mix, and hopefully they can get by quite safely and not get tangled up in any incidents to take out the front runners, which would be a nightmare in these sorts of conditions.
Well, because of Alex's crash or whatever happened to him, Ryder and Bull are now free to attack each other as they go now into Hawthorns round. They were side by side going through Pilgrim's Drop, but it looks like Rigel managed to keep the inside going around Hawthorns and has managed to back Bull off. However, Rigel goes slightly wide and at Westfields goes off and compromises himself, and that's given Bull the pass through. Sorry, Rigel went off there, and that's given Bull the pass through at Dingledale. And yeah, that's now Bull with a comfortable gap to Rigel now. as we'll see the timing screens update in a second.
I will say though that Dahlgren, who was in P1, has dropped back to P4, and has a 4-second gap from P3. So there must have been an incident up front, possibly, or maybe Dahlgren maybe made a mistake, because now we've got RWB Godzilla in the Nissan in P1, who is closely followed by 0.4 of a second by Gixxer in the Lexus, and P3 we've got RWB Isaac in the Mercedes, who's 0.8 behind. So these guys are separated by a second and a bit between P1 and P3, as we see Dahlgren drop away actually at the front. So it's all to play for at the moment, and these guys are going to be battling hard for the next 49 minutes.
We've had we saw earlier RWB Isaacs was 6 seconds off Gixxer initially, and his pace has just been phenomenal. Whether it's due to Kai Banks and Gixxer fighting each other with Dahlgren, whatever's happened, Isaac has just managed to catch up to that pack massively, and I wonder if the Mercedes is just really strong around here in the wets, because we've seen the pace Alex has had, we've seen the pace that Rigel, Mertens has done phenomenally well as well, keeping it in P7, and yeah, Isaac's just, it seems like no effort from him to try and catch up.
Yeah, I think he's doing a phenomenal job. As I said earlier on, he was in a good position because he was 4 seconds behind the leading pack, the leading trio, and he had a 10-second gap to the car behind. So he was in a great position to just lap and figure out how his car's behaving in these conditions. And I think he's done that. He's in P3 now with potentially an issue or mistake made by Dahlgren, who is now in P4 and 4 seconds behind Isaac. And I think, as I said, he's had that time to adjust to the conditions, perfect his line, and now he's attacking these top two and potentially fighting for the win here. And the Mercedes, which I think is going to be a good car around here, as we see predominantly the top 10 are all front engine rear-wheel drive cars, apart from the two Ferraris in P4 and P5 and a Porsche in P10, which was newcomer, as we said earlier, that we thought he could potentially drag that car up to the front guys. And I think he's doing a commendable job at the moment in these conditions, but it seems to be that the front engine rear-wheel drive cars are having more success.
You could say he's doing a Sterling's job.
I was going to say that, but I thought I'd have to say no pun intended.
Well, we've currently got Rigel, who's just gone into the pits. He's just gone off into the pits, dropping him down into P15 currently. But that's him now done with his his mandatory pit stop. We saw Damien earlier just spinning off. It looks like he's not having a good time in the wet. And yeah, I think his feelings are being echoed a lot. We've still got a very big battle at the front between P1, 2 and 3. And Dahlgren, with whatever damage he's got, is catching up to P3. He's currently 1.5 seconds off P3 man of RWB Isaacs. But there's no change in the battle at the front as they're coming up to lap traffic, and it's a big train full of lap traffic ahead.
Yeah, I mean, they've got through that. They've got caught up to Simcox now, Kaneko and Rigel, which are the P17, P16 and P15 runners. The front runners are now catching these guys, and I think they're in their own pack trying to battle for position, but the front runners are also so close. So these blue flag overtakes are going to be very important for these guys to keep it clean and keep it on track, because blue flags in these conditions are tricky, to say the least. You don't want to be offline. You want to try and stay on that wet line, and if you're forced onto that dry line, sometimes you can understeer, and this is where contacts are made when you're trying to let people by. Often in the wet, you just see people staying on the line as best they can and trying to make the safe overtake.
I don't have my synonyms in front of me. Give me a second. Categorically, James. But yeah, there's still a battle up at the front between P1, 2 and 3 as we see Gixxer now going into the pits now for an early pit stop. I wonder if he was getting tired of following Kai Banks around and is going to try and go for the undercut, which with clear conditions it could help, but I wonder if following Kai Banks has maybe kind of reset his head a bit and got him kind of, I wonder if his pace will drop without having someone to follow as quick as these guys at the front. But yeah, it's just one of those things you just kind of have to cope with.
I will say we're seeing Gixxer drop down now actually to P8. So
Yeah, he's in the
possibly...
pit, James.
Oh, I didn't... Oh, sorry, I was completely lost there. Completely lost.
Yeah, don't worry, Giggs hasn't had enough. He's currently in the pit lane. But
I was too busy watching Pitwall live. I was like, where's he gone? What's happened? But yeah, okay, he's in the pits. Early pit stop, as you say. Oh, I've completely lost my place there. Early pit stop, get those fresh set of tyres on. Hopefully he can drag them out to the end, as we're saying. You know, the conditions... these guys are going to be leaning on these tyres, and if it starts to dry up, which, well, it's saying next 30 minutes is going to be rain, so it doesn't look that way.
Yeah, it's not going to dry up.
Yeah, I think these guys are definitely going to be on wets the whole time, and hopefully they can drag it out to the end.
Let me get my synonyms. Positively correct, James. Luckily for Gixxer, he's come out into a massive gap. He's timed that perfectly if he did time it, or if it's just good fortune, but he's got a massive gap ahead of him to try and... well, he doesn't even need to catch up, he just needs to keep lapping consistently, and I wonder if this is really good for him and his chances of getting P1 back, as it looks like P1 is still under attack by Isaacs with Kai Banks in that Nissan, and he's just constantly under threat from Isaacs, who's not giving him any reprieve whatsoever, and Dahlgren is still catching up to him. He's still going comfortably a second, 1.1 second behind him, and yeah, it's just very interesting for those. Although we've just seen a drive-through for car 720 McLaren in P26 of Nemeth, so that's not what you want, but it's not surprising that people are exploring the track limits in this wet condition.
Yeah, I mean, it's to be expected. Often you know, the aim is to make as little mistakes as possible to keep it clean, but unfortunately in these conditions you never know what you're gonna get, really, and to be doing track limits is not uncommon. Often in real life they have sensors here which you can trip at turn 1, turn 2, which is Paddock Hill, Druids, and Graham Hill. Those are where the sensors are usually in real life, so you know, you try not to trip those, and if you do, it's they take a photo of you immediately, so you can't get away with it. But ACC obviously being software related, and they can pretty much see anywhere where you're exploiting track limits, so you can't do as many sneaky things as you can in real life, unfortunately. But yeah, it's unfortunate to see, but it's just how it's going to be in these conditions to be getting track limits.
Well, given my history with speed camera streams, I quite find, you know, I think I've got good chances of getting away with it for real. However, we just saw now on our feed that we've got, unfortunately we can't share it with you guys. We'll definitely try and sort out these technical issues for next time. But we just saw Kaneko let past Rigel, who probably got confused with a blue flag, as Kai Banks is trying to come through now, but Kai Banks is currently under attack by Isaacs going down Pilgrim's Drop, heading now into Hawthorne, and it looks like Kai manages to hold the inside, but he's going to have compromised himself now, heading up to whichever corner's coming up next, through Westfield.
Westfield.
Yeah. Going through Westfields now with Kai Banks still under constant pressure from Isaacs, and that battle there has managed to let Dahlgren come up, but it looks like Dahlgren's having a little excursion off track, and that's just dropped him down. While we see Robert in P28 also exploring the kind of track and the off-road facilities that they have here. Luckily he's
to be expected at Sheen Curve. That over the crests blind apex is just, you know, takes no prisoners, and as we've seen Dahlgren there come through and dip into the gravel, and Rogers was off there as well, so these conditions are treacherous, and that part of the circuit is definitely treacherous. Even in the dry, to get it right is an achievement, but I think these guys are actually coming up on some more lap traffic as well at the front, so as they've just passed actually, so yeah, they've got a bit of clean road in front of them now, but these guys are going to be thinking about pitting and thinking about when should I get on these fresh tyres. I mean, should Isaac try for that undercut and get on those fresh tyres a bit earlier? So it's all to play for at the moment. I think Isaac's probably in the good position that he can determine, you know, he can push a pit stop or he can try and go long. So Godzilla's, he can either react or just try and play his own game out front.
Yeah, that's definitely kind of the only options for Godzilla is to try and kind of react to Isaacs. It's not. That's kind of one of the downfalls of being P1, is P2 can determine when you should pit. But we're currently seeing Camaletto now catching up to Alex Smith, who's still nursing that damage all the way around, and Camaletto is now effectively pushing his bumper along with Pilgrims, heading into Hawthorne now. But it looks like Alex manages to stay ahead, and it looks like Camaletto's dropped back to avoid collecting Alex going through there. But as they go around now Westfield, going through Hawthorne's, heading down through Westfield, coming up to Sheen Curve, and it looks like Camaletto is not going to let Alex off with anything. You know, it's just brutal, just defense from Alex right now, trying to keep Camaletto behind. But it does raise a kind of a question for me: is what's Alex's plan? Is he going to go for a pit, or is he just aiming to hold up Camaletto?
I think he's going to be pushing as hard as he can. I mean, he's got that front end damage. He'll be understeering everywhere, by the looks of it, and he'll struggle through Paddock Hill as we're seeing them. Unfortunately, the viewers can't, but they're coming through Paddock Hill now, and it seems like Alex is doing a really good job of nursing that car as far as he can, and hopefully he can keep that pace going and maybe fix the damage in the pits, but that might lose him some time. So, you know, he's got some decisions to make on when's best to pit for him and get on those fresh tyres. But they're doing a great job at the moment, having a really close battle.
For those who are wondering what's happened to Goat Friend, he's not crashed. He's gone into the pits. He took our advice, and it looks like he's made the decision to go into the pits before Godzilla and try and go for the undercut. But it looks like he's managed to come out ahead of Gixxer by a fair margin, which, I mean, Gixxer was hounding Goat Friend as well earlier on, and it looks like the undercut for Gixxer it's not worked at all.
Yeah, go ahead. Goat Friend, sorry, he's done a great job and come out in P10 with that earlier pit. As you see, the front 9 runners haven't pitted yet, so it's going to be close for sure. And I think these guys at the front are going to start thinking about, you know, diving into the pits pretty soon, and getting those fresh sets of tyres on. You know, Godzilla and Dahl Green now in P1 and P2, they've got a gap of 3.3 seconds now. So, you know, Godzilla's got a decent gap and a good thinking space, and can really determine, you know, if he's coming up on traffic, maybe he'll just dive in the pits and get that fresh set on to not have to deal with lap traffic.
Well, speaking of lap traffic, it looks like Isaacs has gone into the pit as well. He kind of followed Goat Friend into the pit, but Isaacs has managed to come out ahead of Goat Friend. So it's looking good for Isaacs at the moment, and I'm wondering if the later pit stop is working out better for everyone, because it seems like people are pitting early. The undercut's just not worked whatsoever for them.
Yeah, I think they may have got caught up in traffic. As we've seen a lot of incidents early on, with a lot of cars off and a lot of damage. These guys that have maybe pitted earlier and got caught up in these incidents, or not been able to exploit those fresh sets of tyres, and had to fuel up even more than they needed to try and last out to the end of this 80-minute race. So I think the later pit stop may be benefiting these guys at the moment, and Godzilla might decide in P1 to push it as far as he can, really, to try and get that fresh set near the end when it all counts.
Currently looking further down the grid at P24 and P23, we've got Dan Anderson trying to hold off Newis as they go around Sterling's at the moment. These two have been battling a fair amount recently after the pit stops, and it just looks like Newis can't get the traction on that very grunty BMW. Of course, it's rear-wheel drive. Well, they're all rear-wheel drive, but it's such a grunty car, and that's not something that you want in a wet, especially around here where it's it's one of more of the technical circuits rather than a straight line circuit. So it's a bit more tricky for Newis, but he seems to be pressuring Anderson very nicely as they go up now into Druids. But it doesn't look like Anderson's under much pressure as they pass lap traffic right now. But yeah, it's going well for these two. They're keeping it nice and clean, which is what we want to see, and it looks like we're having a jolly old battle.
Yeah, I'm sure Lewis has got that traction control all the way up as far as it will go to keep that BMW under control and keep that torque under control, because that thing can really pull out of the corners. So he's doing a great job of keeping it all in line and having a good battle with Mercedes in front of him.
Yeah, we're also looking at the battle between Kaneko and Shepherd for P15. Kaneko's ahead of Shepherd, and he's still not pitted, so he is on older tyres compared to Shepherd. But Kaneko looks like he's nursing the car around. We've seen him spin off a couple times, but I've not seen him make direct contact with anyone except the wall, which can be kind of reflected in his front splitter, which is it's just chipped to shit, isn't it? But as they head on now through Paddock Hill, heading up to Druids, it looks like Kaneko is not wanting to give up any positions, even though he'll pit in a bit, and Shepherd will get past. It looks like Shepherd wants to get past now, even though Kaneko will be pitting in the next 20 minutes probably.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll want to get in and get that front splitter repaired, and I'm sure Shepherd is begging for him to dive in, because at the end of the day they're fighting for position at the moment, and there's no blue flag being shown because they're fighting position on track. So Shepherd will be begging Kaneko to dive into the pits and let him go and let him use those fresh tyres and get the pace advantage.
We're also looking at RWB Cricky in P20 with Toledo in P21. These two, they've not actually been fighting that much from what we've seen. They've kind of just been keeping at it, but of course we're not able to show the feed, so you can't see how much of a battle they're having. But it looks like Toledo's had to drop away slightly, look like a compromise exit, going onto the Cooper Straight. I keep thinking that left-hander has a name, but according to my track map it doesn't. But that looked like a very close encounter between Cricky and a lapped Aston Martin. But luckily Cricky manages to come away unscathed. Unlike P13 man Alex Smith, who's had a spin down at Paddock Hill. He's now off in the sand trap, and do you know what, James? I'm seeing a green box next to his name, which means he's just pitted, and he's already had a spin.
Yeah, he must have come out the pits, got on the throttle, and been overcommitted through turn one, and just got caught up in something possibly. As we're seeing another slow car of Shepherd there as well, so maybe he got caught up with traffic coming out the pits.
We saw Shepherd a while ago. A minute ago he was battling Kaneko, and we literally said he just needs to wait until Kaneko goes into the pits. So yeah. I wonder if he got a little bit too impatient and went for the dive.
And maybe Alex got caught up in that. But unfortunately we didn't see the incident there. But Alex is not really having a great time of it at the moment. Qualified P1, but just isn't with the front runners, and proved he had the pace in the practice, but it just kind of hasn't been able to extract it in the wet race. Something I will point out though, I've just been watching Mike Bull's time in P4. He's just set his personal best thus far on the previous lap with a personal fastest sector, and he's looks like a second faster on that previous lap than the guys in front of him. So he's closing in on this front group. He's in P4 at the moment. I don't think he's pitted as yet, which is
just coming into
the pits. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see where he comes out, because he's been really pushing the lap times, as has Newcomer as well in P11. So these guys have been setting personal bests, and actually Newcomer set a purple sector in Sector 3 on that previous lap. So these guys are starting to find their feet now and really start to push on and drive these lap times home. So it's all to play for, and I think these guys at the front are going to have a really good battle. It's going to be really close. But as we see, everyone up to P12 has been lapped thus far. So the inconsistency is really not paying off for these guys further back, possibly having more incidents or getting caught up in it. So hopefully it can all sort of settle down and we can see a really close battle up the front, which I presume we will see.
Well, we're coming up to the 30-minute mark, so of course that'll be... Well, my maths isn't good enough to do fractions in my head, but that's 3/8 of the race left. And yeah, it's getting spicy at the moment. There's these little packs that are kind of forming between 2-3 cars. as the pit stops are being completed. But there's a lot of people also in clean air. But it seems like the biggest factor of people going off is themselves. We've still got Dahlgren in P1, Mertens in P2, but Kai Banks is now in the pits. And yeah, it just looks like people are taking themselves off.
Yeah, I think again in these conditions is if you keep it clean, you're in for a good race and a good result. And you know, some of these guys have had incidents that they probably caused themselves by possibly pushing too hard. And I think in a lot of cases, if they just maybe drove at 95% rather than 100%, they might pick up easy positions. But it'll be interesting to see where Godzilla comes out, who was in P1 and has pitted, in comparison to his competitors that have pitted, to see whether going long has worked. But at the moment, it seems like Isaac in P3 has come out ahead.
Yeah, that's Isaac's ahead now, heading along the Cooper Straight with Kai Banks only just going around Druids now. So it looks like it's paid off for Isaacs, and I mean he had consistent pace in the first half of the race, and it was kind of a waiting game for us to see if he was able to maintain that pace all the way through, because of course he had that early pit stop compared to everyone else in the top 5 battle that we were seeing. And yeah, he just keeps going. He's just chugging along quite nicely. A battle that's still going on though is between Madao and Camaletto. 30 minutes later, and these two are still on each other's asses. But Madao just can't seem to make the pass and hold the position compared to Camaletto. But it's still, what we're seeing is fantastic racing, and we'll definitely try and have something for you guys. But it looks like the stream is now picked on Godzilla, and I'm hoping this means that Auto Director has decided that it's going to wake up.
Well, fingers crossed. I think we did see Damien in the pit there for a while on the stream, which is unfortunate. But maybe he was having such a tough race that he decided enough was enough and possibly retired the car. So we'll have to see where he ends up in the stream.
I mean, I'm seeing CSAM complain that we've not had a lot of Damien Wilcons on screen. So
yeah, I mean,
yeah, I wish we could give you more, but I
wanted to see more of Damien, to be honest, and then he was, you know, we've had so much potential in this race, so it's a shame we didn't get to see much of him.
I'll tell you what, though, he's going to be raging that we've seen every single one of his crashes and spins and offs, which is probably not what he's going to want to be seeing. But you know, also Director God has decided that he wants to focus on Damien, and now we're focusing on Godzilla, which I'm actually quite happy for, because it means we can track his progress on trying to catch up with Isaacs. But from the pace we've seen from Isaacs, it seems like Solheim 2.0, but hopefully he can hold it.
Yeah, I mean, he's put that fresh set on and just got to work, really, and Godzilla has had to try and come back at him, and now with that fresh set. But you know, 11-second gap is a long way. But in these conditions, you know, if Isaac starts making mistakes and he starts chewing into those tires, you know, we could see a really good battle near the end of the race. It'll definitely be interesting to see, though, how Dahlgren and Mertens come out of this in P1 and P2s. They have not pitted yet, and they are going for a really long first stint in comparison to their peers.
Well, one battle that I'm currently keeping my eye on right now is between Goatfriend, Camaletto, and Mad Al. These 3-4 are fighting for P6 at the moment. Goatfriend's pace seems to have dropped off a little bit. I wonder if he's had an off and is feeling a bit skittish, or if he's just losing the pace from the tyres. But these guys, I've said before that Camaletto and Mad Al, they've been fighting from the get-go. But now Goatfriend's been thrown up into the mix, so I wonder if a potential move by Camaletto on Goatfriend will open an opportunity for Mad Al, as they go around Druids heading onto the Cooper Straight now for the left-hander. And it looks like Goatfriend gets a slightly better run than Camaletto, but geez, I just feel bad for Mad Al in that Ferrari, because he's going up against a Lexus and a Merc, which there are no slouches on the straight, and
yeah,
that Ferrari just wheezes, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think the Ferrari often feels a bit choked, especially on tracks like this with that long straight up to Hawthorns from Surtees. And the GP section, with being so fast, these two, the Lexus and the Mercedes, are just in a league of their own around there. And I think, the Ferrari really catches up in the corners, but it has no answer for those cars in front on the straight. So I think Mad Al's going to have to pull his finger out with this one and really have to make a move, as we see. Actually, it was that Camaletto trying to.
It's Goatfriend going wide, and he goes into they go into Sterling's, and unfortunately Goatfriend understeers into the side of Camaletto. Camaletto did leave the space, so Kimi Räikkönen can't get angry about that, but it looks like Goatfriend was the loser in that, and unfortunately spun out going into the entrance of Sterling's. Massively unfortunate for that. That was going to be a great battle, but of course that's unleashed the reins for Camaletto, and has opened the floodgates with Mad Al back onto the arse of him. I wonder if Mad Al backed away slightly, hoping that those two would kill each other, and well, they've killed one.
Yeah.
Now back for Mad Al to try and make a move back on Camaletto, as you can barely fit a cigarette's paper between them. Can you, James?
No, I think Mad Al will be licking his lips right about now on the back of Camaletto. Definitely, it's going to be a close battle between these two. I mean, shame that Goatfriend and Camaletto had a bit of contact there, and I think as it looked from my perspective, it looked like a bit of a racing incident, because Camaletto just dove round the outside at Sterling, and Goatfriend just didn't even know I hit him, I don't think, and just didn't expect him to be there. So possibly, understeered into him a little bit, and then tried to get on the throttle a bit too early and just taking himself round. But it was just an unfortunate incident, but given Camaletto and Mad Al the position.
Yeah, we're also seeing Godzilla being caught up by Gixxer as well. Gixxer's now 4/10 off Kai Banks, aka Godzilla. We need to settle on which name he wants to use. But that's now Godzilla going round through Paddock Hill Bend right now, with Gixxer. Well, Gixxer's caught up massively. There was, I swear there was more than a 2-second gap between them. And yeah, he's caught right back up, and it looks like Dahlgren is still staying out along with Mertens in P1 and 2. Those two are they're playing the long game right now, but according to what I know from fuel capacity and fuel usage, I don't think they have long left in the tank. They should be pitting in the next 5 minutes, according to what I can remember of their fuel.
I think they're going to be running on fumes very soon, and they're going to have to get some fresh tyres on and see where they end up within this pack. They've gone for a really long stint, but I have a feeling that Isaac is going to jump both of those in the pits and go for P1, I believe. Looking at the gap, which is probably around, what would it be, about 30-second gap between him and P1, so probably not enough to stay ahead at this stage. I think Isaac at the moment has Dahlgren and Mertens in the bag once they pit.
Well, what I just saw right now is RWB Cricky making a pass on Shepherd, it looks like. As I say that, Shepherd dives down the inside, going into Sheen Curve. No, that's going into Westfields. Absolutely beautiful manoeuvre. They both were getting passed by a faster car, but they both moved over and were being nice and polite to each other. But it looks like Cricky snuck through past Shepherd, going into Westfields down the inside. It was not a move that Shepherd was expecting, as he left the door wide open for him.
Yeah, beautiful move, and just played his cards close to his chest, and then made that epic send down the inside, and as you say, the door was just left wide open for him to make that move. On the actual stream with Godzilla, as we're following, we actually saw, I think it was Alex Smith I saw off again about 30 seconds ago at Sterling. So he's really having a nightmare of a race, and definitely didn't expect this, I believe, with his qualifying pace. So really unfortunate for him, and hopefully he can pick himself back up and try and fight for the position to the left.
Yeah, unfortunately on my timing screens I'm not seeing Alex anymore.
Maybe he's just given up.
Which maybe means he's given up right now. And yeah, the only thing I can say to Alex is get good. We saw Shepherd earlier having a moment going around Clark Curve. He got a bit sideways, and that was just after he'd been passed by Cricky, which has now given Nielsen P15 as he managed to pass Shepherd, who's now down in P16. It looks like Shepherd's having a bit of... The arse of that Aston just does not look stable whatsoever, as he's now just been passed by lap markers now. But we're seeing lots of cars deciding to go off-road to let faster cars get by, which is probably... They've probably got the same chance of getting hit if they're off-road as if they're on-road. From what we're seeing, it's not through contact with each other. It just seems to be the wet kind of interfering with the grip coefficient. You know.
Yeah,
the
treacherous conditions. Yeah, I mean, at least it isn't like Paul Ricard where they're all aquaplaning on the straights. And the water was so deep in that sim race that they were actually just lifting off the ground with their under trays. So
I can dream, man. I can dream that happened.
At least it's not that bad. So it's manageable at this stage. Very wet but manageable.
We're also watching now. James and I were watching currently the battle for P8 between Goatfriend and Newcomer. And it looks like Goatfriend gets a little sideways and Newcomer goes into the back of him and they punt each other, but luckily they're both still on track. But it looks like Goatfriend slowing down to let Newcomer pass. A bit of gentlemanly, chivalry going on there, and that's now Newcomer now in front, with Goatfriend dropping behind to P9, with Newcomer in P8. So that was a bit unfortunate for Goatfriend, but it's good to see chivalry still alive in these races, and it's just absolutely, it's just a bit mental at the moment. But we've seen
Dahlgren in the pits,
but he's dropping down the order. It looks like he'll come out in P8. It looks like at this rate. No, he's still in P7, but it looks like Dahlgren's only just managed to come out of the car behind him of Newcomer, and Newcomer immediately dives down to the inside to go through Druids, and he goes a little bit deep. Dahlgren's coming back on the inside to try and get around Newcomer, and they touch and they tap, and that looks like Newcomer's off on the track, and that's him having a massive moment, which is let Goatfriend back through, dropping Newcomer down into P9. But Newcomer's not having any of that. He's deciding to have another go at Goatfriend, goes deep again, going into Surtees. Going round the outside of Goatfriend and says, you know what, I'm having that back. And that's him back in P8.
That just shows that he has trust in that car to send it round the outside at Surtees. That is big commitment moves from Newcomer, and he really knows where the limit of that Porsche is, and he's now got Dahlgren very much in his sight and is licking his lips at the prospect of trying to get past this Ferrari, which he is now, is sending it down the inside, possibly at Sheen Curve, has a look, pops back in line, decides, no, maybe next time, maybe we'll play it safe and try and make it a clean overtake on Dahlgren, as he's all over the back of that Ferrari. So Newcomer's definitely looking to make a move anytime now on Dahlgren.
I mean, he's just absolutely blistering pace behind Dahlgren. He's already on the back of his bumper after losing 2 seconds from that moment after coming out of Druids. And it seems like he's kind of wanting to have another go and kind of be like, you know what, no, that's my position. Give it back, mate. As they go around now through Paddock Hill, heading up to Druids. It looks like Newcomer had a little bit of a slight moment going into Paddock Hill and coming out of it, but he's managed to come back onto the back of Dahlgren, heading now towards the left-hander that heads onto the Cooper Straight. Newcomer's still all over the back of him, struggling for traction as he comes out of a left-hander. But this is where he knows the grip level around Surtees, heading now, but goes a little bit deeper, but it looks like he's going to try and get around Dahlgren, but that Porsche's acceleration is just... It's great initially, but he just doesn't have the straight line speed to catch up to Dahlgren on the straight.
Yeah, I think he needs to get he needs to get close to the back of that Ferrari to get that slipstream effect. Actually, we see Dahlgren just dip off at Hawthorne's there on the grass, and that's allowed Newcomer to close right up on the exit of Westfield, coming up to Sheen Curve now, and these guys are absolutely fighting for this position tooth and nail. These guys are so close together, you would not believe. And these conditions as well, these guys are having trust in each other, their cars, and keeping it clean, which is great to see. But unfortunately, we'd love to show you, but we're just having technical difficulties at the moment, and we'll try and describe it as best as we can. But these guys are really fighting each other hard for position.
Yeah, Newcomer's busy dusting left and right on exit of Sterling's, trying to get any traction he can find for that rear engine car. But unfortunately, he's not having much luck. But he seems to be faster through Paddock Hill. He's now back onto the back of Dahlgren, heading down to Druids. He looks down the inside, but tucks back in behind Dahlgren as they go now in single file going around Druids. He gets a nice exit compared to Dahlgren as they head up now onto the left-hander for the Cooper Straight. But it looks like Dahlgren's managed to get a better exit coming out of that left-hander and is pulled away again.
I'm looking at the battle at the front at the moment with Godzilla, and he's closed right up to P2 man of Mertens in the Mercedes, followed by Gixxer closely behind. So these guys are fighting really hard for P2, P3 and P4 at the moment. We see Isaac has a commanding lead over P2 with an 8-second gap, so he just needs to keep it clean, stay out of trouble, and he's got this one in the bag. But these guys fighting for those last two podium positions are really hammering each other hard and keeping each other honest. So it'll be great to watch this battle at the front over the next few laps and see who comes out on top. But I think Godzilla is definitely lining up a move on that Mercedes in front of him. Whether he can get it done with the grunt of that Nissan down the straights, or whether he can get it done in the corners, it's going to be interesting for sure. But we're seeing that Mercedes of Mertens taking that defensive line into Druids, making sure Godzilla's going to be kept firmly behind, and hopefully Mertens is hoping that he won't be seeing that position anytime soon.
Yeah, it's good to see that the camera has decided to settle on Godzilla so we can see this fantastic battle up at the front. Further back, we've got Charger, who's currently hounding the back of Simcox, and actually, he's saying that Charger's just managed to get past Simcox. So Charger is now in P21, ahead of P22 man of Simcox, and seems to have pulled away. It seems like Simcox had a slight incident earlier coming out of Druids. But yeah, it's all good. But right behind him is P1 man, who's going to be trying to fight his way through. But Isaacs has been commanding so far, and I just hope he can keep it on the straight and true all the way through.
Yeah, Isaac again. I think he's made the right calls with his pit stops. Got on the right tyre at the right time and kept it clean and stayed out of traffic really. But these guys in P2, 3 and 4 are really close now. As we're seeing on stream, Godzilla's close right up to Mertens there. I think Mertens had a bit of an issue at Sterling's, maybe just kicked the rear end out a bit too much on the exit curb, and that's really let Godzilla close up, especially with these cars coming out the pit lane. It's going to be interesting for sure with this battle. Hopefully these cars can acknowledge the blue flags and stay out of the way and let these guys fight it till the end really. But yeah, great racing up the front, and I don't think it's going to end anytime soon.
No, it's I'm going to keep saying it. Thank goodness you also director chose Godzilla, because for a time it was fun watching Damien having a little bit of figure skating on the wet track, but these Godzilla and Martins are just hounding each other. Godzilla's desperately trying to get past. Well, Gixxer, he seems to have done what Mad Al was doing earlier, where he stays back and tries to wait for each other to punt each other off. As we see a Lambo parked on the side there, after having a spin facing the wrong way. But Godzilla's still trying to find a way through, and Gixxer's still hanging on, being like, nah, I'm ready for when you fuck up. Like,
yeah, I think Gixxer's probably made the right decision there of maybe backing off a little bit and letting the two in front of him fight for position, because it's ultimately possibly going to give him the P2 position if these guys take each other out. And we saw that Godzilla tried to have a go at Mertens around the outside. I think that was Westfield, and it just didn't pay off, and it allowed Gixxer to close right up to Godzilla to the point where Godzilla really had to think about defending into Sheen Curve, as we see actually some traffic that's being lapped into Paddock Hill. So these guys really going hard at each other, and I think Gixxer is probably in the position I'd want to be in, watching the battle ahead, and he's he can sort of be very plucky and try and profit off these two possibly making a mistake.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting for these two still battling it out. Well, these three still battling it out. But I can't get over Isaac. He's like we saw the pace early on. I just don't know how he's managed to make this wet work out that much in his favour.
Yeah, I think even in these conditions, looking at it now, I mean, with these guys battling, he's pulled another second of gap on them, and possibly more. So yeah, he's pulled even more now. So with these guys battling hard, he's just walking away. Seems very comfortable at the front there, and can just lap consistently, and that's allowing him to potentially take the win here. And as long as he doesn't get the commentator's curse on him, like Solheim did in the previous round at Imola, I think he's got it in the bag.
Well, there's still 9 minutes left on the clock. Hopefully, everyone, you're still enjoying the stream, or at least listening to us. And you're not too bored. I promise we'll try and get these technical issues sorted for next time, so that we can follow everything else. But yeah, it's still this battle up at the front, at least we're watching that, and it's a sight to behold. We've still got Godzilla hounding the back of him as they go into Druids, heading down now to the left-hander, but leads onto the Kuba straight, and geez, Gixxer is just, he's got to be praying, but yeah, it's 9 minutes left and anything can happen, right?
Yeah, I think Gixxer just needs to get the popcorn out, to be perfectly honest, and just sit back and relax and watch the carnage unfold. I think these two, Godzilla and Mittens, are going to be possibly in the closing stages. They might start knocking each other and battle each other as hard as they can, and Gixxer can just sit back and relax and watch the show. He's definitely got front row seats for what we're watching, so we'll see what comes of it, and see, because he's not being pressured by Mad Al. I mean, Mad Al's 15 seconds behind Gixxer at the moment, so he's got a clear track behind him, and he just needs to wait for his opportunity to pounce.
Well, looking further down the grid at P6 and P7, we've got Camaletto having to defend off Dahlgren, and we know Dahlgren has some pace, but we also know that Camaletto doesn't like to give up a battle that easily, and will fight to the end. So between these two, they're just kind of bouncing off each other, not literally bouncing off each other, but in terms of timing, they're bouncing between 1 second gap down to 0.1 second gap. So Dahlgren is trying to have a look, but it just seems like Camaletto keeps covering him off really nicely. Elsewhere, however, everyone seems to have found their own little gap and is just lapping, trying to avoid getting in the way of lapped cars. It's kind of what I expected for the end of this kind of race, where you've got different people spinning off at different points, you've got different paces and everything. So it is kind of what I expected towards the end, but I'm so grateful that we still have this massive battle going, especially for such a high position as well.
Yeah, I think we can put an elastic band around these three that we're watching at the moment, and even between Dahlgren and Camaletto, there's an elastic band between them as well. They're sort of yo-yoing around and.
Whoa! That looks like Kai Banks is off as well. That looks like him going extremely wide into Hawthorns, which you're not meant to do. It's not rallycross. That's giving Gixxer the position, which it's what we said. He just had to wait, and that's him now made a position for zero effort, effectively.
Yeah, we just saw Godzilla go wide there, and it seemed like his own mistake, trying too hard possibly to stay with the Mercedes in front of him, and ultimately giving Gixxer the position, which is not what he wanted. But Gixxer's just sat there and let it come to him really, and now he's just got to pressure Mertens before Godzilla catches him back up. So if he can keep the pressure on and wait for a mistake, he could be comfortably in P2 by the end of this race.
Well, battle that is going on is between Newis and Humphreys down in P17 and 18. Newis in the BMWs managed to make a pass going along the Pilgrim's Drop. That BMW Mulder, it just absolutely dominated the Humphreys and the Mercedes. Mercedes is usually quite good on the straights, but the pace Newis has over that Mercedes is just phenomenal, and he's walked away and he's already got a 0.7 second gap to Humphreys, even though Humphreys hasn't had a spin or anything.
Yeah, it's great to see. I'm sorry, I was just changing my stream there. Yeah, I mean, there's battles all up and down this field, even in these conditions, and this late in the race, there's still positions to be made. And It just shows that the level of racing in this RWB league is great to see, and you can view it all as we're seeing the data on the Pitwall Live as well, which is a great tool to be used by us and by individuals watching that can really dissect the times and how the cars are performing and see where people are picking up time as well. So you can even spy on your competitors if you'd like.
Yeah, it's perfect if you've got a second monitor and you're driving and you can kind of see, if you're on the long straight like Le Mans, you can see what your competitors are doing, where and how to improve. Some action that I did miss while I was watching Lewis and Humphreys battling was Dahlgren getting past Camaletto for the P6. And just to show the pace difference, Camaletto is already a second and a half down from Dahlgren in P6. So, yeah, it
seems like Dahlgren maybe struggled initially coming out hits with his initial pace, but is now and has really allowed himself to get in that rhythm and the groove again and catch back up to Camaletto and get past. So yeah, he seems like he's got back into his groove, and hopefully he can just keep it clean for the rest of the race. I don't think he's going to catch Mad Al now with an 11-second gap with 4 minutes to go. I think that would take a miracle or an act of God really if Mad Al maybe puts it off. That would be the only opportunity for Dahlgren to make up any more positions. So he just needs to focus on keeping Camaletto behind and bringing it home in P6 really.
Yeah, there's not much that needs to be done for these guys. They're just kind of, Godzilla just needs to kind of, I don't know if he has the pace to try and catch up with Gixxer and Martins. I wonder if he's kind of happy with the positions they've got. But it looks like Gixxer's looking down the inside anyway of Martins anyway to kind of show him that I'm still there.
I think Gixxer probably actually with Godzilla and Martins battling allowed Gixxer to sort of save his tyres a little bit and see where the grip was, allowing him to now attack hard on Martins, which we saw go wide at Paddock Hill, and now Gixxer has a look down the inside at Druids, and he's got the inside line. Druids pushes him out wide, and I think that's the position done. Gixxer's got it now. He's got past the both of them, and now Martins is being pressured by Godzilla, so that's position gone. I think Gixxer's got it in the bag. If he can keep his nose clean for the rest of the race, that's it done.
That was extremely crisp as well. Very clean. I'm looking further back at P10 and P11. I'm currently looking at RWB FX fighting Nate Newcomer, and it looks like Newcomer he's really struggling to try and get past FX in the Aston Martin. It's that lime green with the bright pink livery. It's quite a striking one, but of course it's Porsche versus Aston, and it looks like they've got the inside, but of course they're coming to lap traffic, and Newcomer decides that he's not going to try and risk getting into any kind of kerfuffle at this stage of the race, even though they've got an 11-second gap to P12 man Rigel. But yeah, Newcomer's constantly everywhere, and again we saw this earlier. Newcomer it seems like he knows where the grip is and is very comfortable kind of pushing the car on the outside line to try and get the run around the outside of people as they head now through the Pilgrim's Drop with Newcomer looking down the inside for Hawthorne's, but he backs out, tucking back in behind FX UK. And yeah, I'll keep an eye on this battle, and you can keep chatting about what's happening up ahead.
No, I mean Godzilla's just about to send it on Martins at the moment as they make contact at Druids. Oh, that was unfortunate.
Oh, that's
as Martins has a moment there. Godzilla doing the right thing and slowing down, waiting for him to catch back up, I think. But it was the move was on, the door was open. Godzilla did have his nose down, but unfortunately, it just seems like they had a slight contact there coming into as Mertens turned in for Druids, and unfortunately that resulted in Mertens having a bit of moment, but no positions lost or gained by anyone really. Godzilla did the right thing, slowed down, let him back through so the battle could continue like gentlemen really, and that's what we expect from something like that when it happens. Great driving, and they've still got possibly another lap to try and sort this out for Godzilla to have another go, so we'll see what happens. But I think that means Gixxer is pretty much sorted himself P2 there with that incident.
Well, further back down with the battle I was watching between Newcomer and FX, it seems Newcomer managed to make the pass quite cleanly around FX and is already pulling a hefty gap to the P11 position, and it looks like he's on the hunt for Bull in P9, but I can't see him having enough time to make it up, as they'll only have the lap they're currently on and one more, as Isaac is currently on his final lap. With a 9.6 second gap to P2, I'm crossing my fingers here because I don't want the commentator's curse to be thrown out on him, but it looks like he's got this in the bag.
Yeah, I mean, Newcomer's been doing a great job with that Porsche. I mean, it's the only Porsche in the top 20. He's doing a sublime job keeping that thing under control and using it to his advantage. I mean, me and you, Josh, saw earlier his move around Surtees around the outside of was it Goatfriend, I believe, and it was absolutely sensational. So he really knows the limits of that car, and I think, you know, up and down the field, these guys in the top 10 really have really thrived in these conditions and found that limit of where the cars look perfectly balanced and they can really exploit that wet tyre. And as we're on the last lap now, I mean, we're on board with Godzilla. I think, you know, he's got 3 more corners to have a last ditch attempt here to try and get past Mertens. So Mertens just needs a couple more clean corners, and that's P3 sewn up for him. But Isaac has crossed the line in P1. Dominant drive from him, and he just had to keep it clean for that last sort of 20% of the race there, and it seems like these top 4 have all been sorted, really, the positions. Yeah, that's done. That's it.
That was a beautiful battle between those guys, but of course further back we've still got battles still ongoing. Newcomer is catching up to Bull, but I don't think it's enough in time. But Bull is of course trying to attack Goatfriend, who's right on his tail, coming round Sterling's, heading up now towards Clearways and Clark Curve. Goes fully inside, has a look, but he can't quite hold it, and yeah, that's Bull in P9 with Goatfriend in P8. Looks like Newcomer is comfortably ahead of FX for no challenge for P10, with FX coming in P11. Rigel's heading round now Sterling's for P12, with Muller comfortably in P13 and Cricky in P14. So yeah, it's very comfortable for those guys. It was a brilliant race, and I'm gutted that we had those technical issues, but I'm sure you guys enjoyed watching Damien have some pirouettes, and of course we got to see the fantastic battle at the very end. But James, what a race! I mean, I know I say this every week, but today I mean it this time. Like, what?
Yeah,
a race.
it's as you say, it's unfortunate these guys couldn't see what we were seeing, the technical issues we had, but yeah, it's been a great race throughout. The conditions have made it extremely interesting, to say the least. Some pirouettes, as you saw from Damien and a few others, but you know, as we cut to Godzilla near the end of the race, he had an exceptional drive. But Isaac out front made all the right strategy calls, got out in clean air. He pitted at the right time and basically just dominated the race, to be perfectly honest. Gixxer did a great job near the end to get past those two. As we were saying, he was just sat there waiting for these guys to make mistakes, and they did. So he basically they just gave him P2. He really didn't have to do all that much to get that position, which is exactly how you should be driving in those conditions. So it's been a great race through and through, and we've seen some great battles up and down the field. And I think that's always the case when we watch these sorts of things, isn't it, Josh?
Yeah, it's always great watching. But yeah, basically that rounds off this week in the Tier 2 race at Brands Hatch and the extreme wet conditions, which is the round 2 of the RWB GT 2021 series. We hope you'll stick with us next week as we watch them go around the little used Hungaroring. It'll be interesting to see if it's wet there. I think there's going to be a lot more action, especially at Hungaroring, where it's quite brutal, and you've got all those sausage curbs as well. But yeah, as always, it's been a pleasure having you with me, James, and thanks for taking the lead on the commentary.
It was interesting to start with, for sure.
But yeah, to keep up with this series and the Constructors League running on Tuesdays and any future leagues that will be running. Be sure to subscribe and hit the notifications button to be alerted to when RWB is streaming. Even for the Endurance Series that will be coming up in March, I believe, will be Endurance Series, which will be fantastic as there's mixed racing as well. It's going to be LMP2s, GT3's, LMP3's at Le Mans. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. And if you do want to get involved with these races, please join the RWB Discord. But as always, thank you for joining us, and remember, don't race alone, race RWB.